It's going. Okay, so should we talk about a Bill of Rights for girls and boys and body image first, since that was what we all had to read?
Yeah, sure.
So Emily, I really liked how you said how you were talking about, what were you saying? Oh yeah, like skinny shaming is like the same thing as like fat shaming.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no such I pretty much did the same thing in my post too, but that article was a little, I don't know how I feel about the article.
Yeah, I don't like I like the perspective that she was coming from as a high school girl herself, and it would be reaching the other high school girls that would be reading it, but to say that that's one of the best examples of that kind of article would probably not be true, just because some of the things she says, like she's not shaming overweight girls or anything like that, but she's shaming other people who aren't normally, criticized.
Yeah.
I actually had a hard time kind of like figuring out what to add for this one, for the Bill of Rights, but I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of had a hard time too. Like mine was kind of like broad, I guess, for what I wanted to add.
I really liked Emily's, like, don't be afraid to be bossy. I kind of went with that too. I kind of said more like the right to like not care about what others think about you. And it kind of goes along with like the video that Emily was talking about too. And just that like we shouldn't like be afraid of what other people say about us. Like, I don't know. I lost my train of thought about where I was going with that.
I just think it's so important for like the word bossy. Like I know that I have been called bossy before, but it's really like I know what I want to get done and I know what I need to do to get there. And if you think I'm being bossy because I'm taking control of my own life and my own situations, then like screw you. Like girls should be able to do what they want and follow their dreams without worrying about who's going to be judging them for their drive and their passion.
Yeah. Like I said in my post that if I were to add anything to the article, it would be the fact about, because personally I think that girls like tear each other apart more than boys do. Yeah. Just like when you see a magazine and you like start to compare yourself with it, like everyone does it, like I've done it. I feel like that just kind of builds like this comparative personality, and like so when they see a girl, like they just, I don't know. But I think we should adding in there something about how to like empower each other instead of like tearing each other apart. Like I feel like society does that enough as it is. So just like learning how to support one another despite how they choose to live their lives, especially something that I talked about was like slut shaming too. I feel like that could be really important, especially in high school.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we've kind of been taught to like put each other, like for girls to put other girls down to kind of like lift themselves up, because like that's the only way that we feel like we can feel adequate or like good enough, because otherwise we'll look at other girls and just automatically think like less of ourselves, which is terrible. So yeah, that's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
Another thing to think about when we're talking about this kind of stuff with our students is that we need to let them know that we've had a lot of the same feelings that they are currently having, and we're not perfect, and we still, like, we went through high school too, and we worried about what we looked like and how we were comparing to others, and I think it's important that we bring it on a more personal level for them so that they see, like, they're not just some, like, weird group of people who are just starting to do this. Like, this has been around forever. And it needs to be changed.
the boys and body image reminded me of this movie that I watched, and it's actually I saw Joy there because she like helped put it together because it was at the Pickett Film Festival in Bellingham. But it's called The Mask You Live In, and it's pretty much like a documentary about how like our society is very hyper masculine, like, and you like boys can't cry, they can't talk about their emotions, and if you're not physically strong, then you're not a man. And so like reading that article really reminded me of that. And then for me, I take that stuff personally because of my little brother, and I like see how like things from society affects him and like how he thinks, like what his definition of being a man is. So I really appreciated how that article like talked about actual ways and solutions that families can like address these issues to their boys, because sometimes I do wonder like if I ever have a boy like as a kid or a girl, like how I choose to do that. Like this module, like this week's content, I feel like really made me think about how I want to raise my kids and like what kind of conversations I want to have with them. But
it also kind of made me think about like how we can like show our kids like how not to perpetuate like that type of mindset and like language in our classroom. Like I always hear people like say man up or like grow a pair or something like that. And I feel like you hear that a lot with kids too. So like how can we like address that in our classrooms and make sure that they understand like how like damaging that language can be to boys' self-esteem.
I'm gonna write that down as a muddy question.
Okay.
And it kind of connects to like the Out Front article that Yahida and I wrote about, and like it was the teacher talking about like what basically she kind of covered the points of like what we should be doing in our classrooms as well as teachers that potentially may have like LGBTQ students in our classroom, and just to like set standards of like not having anti-homophobic like slur or slander or like language in the classroom. That gay teachers can be open with their students so that their students can feel open and comfortable in the classrooms as well, and just like and it also like incorporated like the curriculum into, or like gay issues into the curriculum, and it's just important that like that language is like that our students know that it's like not appropriate to use certain language, and like why, not just like don't say that, but like why, like what is it actually doing when you say that word.
Right, yeah, that the connection, or like the bridging the gap between like why and like figuring it out in the student's head is really important. Because in Out Front, there was the teacher had discussed like one spot where there was a student that was like, okay, I won't say those words in your classroom because I respect you, but I've been like for like years and I talk like that at home and stuff, so I don't see really why I should change. Like, she only made the change in the classroom because of out of respect for her teacher. So there's some connection that has to be made for students to actually like figure out like what's the issue with those words, like why is it wrong. So
yeah, like how would we like emphasize to students like not only is it not okay to use that language in the classroom, but it's also not okay to use it outside the classroom. That's one, like, because you can't exactly control what they're doing outside of the classroom, but I feel like we could definitely have an impact on what they think is okay to say outside. So I don't know how.
I think just starting a conversation with them about like why some of their language can be hurtful, because for me, like, I don't know if this is just me and my personality, but if if someone helps me empathize with what they're going through, then it makes me like second guess like my actions and like whether I want to change them or not. And I feel like starting that at a really young age could be really, really powerful. And something that I plan to do in my classroom is like giving students the choice of letting me and the other people in our class a choice in what pronouns they want to go by, because I know a lot of LGBTQI like community uses they, them, theirs pronouns, whichever one that they identify as. And I think as teachers we need to respect that, especially if we're going to give them that choice. And then if they don't know what pronouns are, like just teaching them and introducing to them about this community before it comes up, I feel like could be really powerful and like could make them really reflect on whether they want to say those words outside of the classroom. But at the same time, I wonder like the parents that will probably fight on that. Some parents might fight on that, and like how young these kids like can be exposed to those things. Like, is there such a thing as an age limit when you're talking about like identity and gender? So, but I think that would be a good start.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I had the casement article, and some of the main points that the article made is that we need more gay and lesbian authors and illustrators celebrating their identity and sharing their life experiences, so that they can serve as models for the students who are reading it, and and that type of literature should also meet the same high standards that we've been assessing other children's literature with, and it can't just focus on the point or whatever that the author is trying to make. It needs to be able to reach all students. And then the author made a really big point to give a few examples of the many different books and stuff and resources there are out there for talking about the LGBTQI community and how teachers need to step out of their comfort zone and not be afraid to incorporate those type of things in their classroom, regardless if they are part of that community or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah, that kind of connects with the other one that we were just talking about too, with there needs to be allies and within like teachers and with the text, I guess, choices too, because there's probably a lot of teachers that are afraid of, what could happen with their jobs or how they're going to be looked at because of the choices that they might make. So I don't know. I guess it depends on like the community that you're in or the school environment, because it could get dicey in some areas maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it talks about how you need like the support from your principal and you need to have those conversations. But what do we do if like our principal is like, no, you like that is inappropriate to be talking about or something,
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know if that would happen, but I feel like if you were to go to certain areas, there would be principals who just want to avoid the issue because they are afraid of speaking up about it.
Yeah. Not only that, I feel like the teachers would mostly be afraid of like pushback from like parents.
Yeah.
So, like they'd be saying like that you're like pushing these like things on their students. It's like if you only have say like one parent that's saying that in a classroom, how can you involve like that literature in your classroom without like offending any of the parents of the students? 'Cause you know that the students are probably not going to be offended by it.
Some of them might be.
Yeah. Their parents may have such a strong like influence over their thinking. They may have always been raised that like, no, that's bad. You can't like don't associate with those people, and they might that just is what they bring into the classroom.
That's hard. told. I was just gonna say, I for the the article that I was supposed to read was Girls, Worms, and Body Image, which like I feel like that was my favorite one to read, even though it was kind of short. Um, there's a lot of questions that were like asked that I had to respond to, but I really liked how that article addressed like various things throughout the article. Like it wasn't only about body image, but it talked about like gender and gender roles, and I feel like the teacher did a pretty good job of addressing that in her classrooms. Like, I really liked the part where she like brought in like I think it was a Barbie, and then she used that as kind of like a discussion starter to talk about her like body image that's portrayed in the media, and then it was like it showed that the students like really understood after seeing like that physical demonstration like what's wrong with that.
Yeah, I appreciated how the article talked about her struggles and how she completely did not succeed at first, but she kept bringing it up, and I think that's so important. Like, just because it doesn't go over well and your students don't understand at first, you have to keep pushing those issues and keep trying to help them understand, and she did a really good job of that. And I said one thing that I would change about one of her, like with the Barbie doll experience, is that I would include like looking at the Ken doll or something, just because we don't want to focus on just the issues that girls have with body image and gender roles. We have to focus on the male side of things as well.
Yeah, and that's like clearly portrayed in like Ken Barbies too. It's like
Yeah.
women ideal body shape, men ideal body shape.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think I totally agree. That would be something really good to add.
Yeah. Even like if you don't want to use a Barbie doll or something, like pick out magazines or something that way you can have the male and female perspective in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what
I
kind
think
of
it's important to talk about too.
Oh, go ahead.
I think it's important to like talk about too that those aren't realistic either. Like it's not realistic at all for it to look like a Barbie doll or like, because Photoshop is a thing. Like if you use magazines or something, like it's important to touch on that stuff. Like if you're talking about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I really talked about a lot, like in my response to that article, was like the point where she had, I think it was the boys and the girls kind of separate, and they made like their little list of like 10 facts about like the opposite sex. And it kind of blew my mind that still on like the boys list was that they thought that it was a fact that girls are not as smart as boys. And so I wonder, I feel like that would be a really good exercise to do with like your students in your classroom to see like because I feel like that's a really good discussion starter about like all these different issues.
Yeah, I think a good way to incorporate that into the classroom could be the video. It was about like the Like a Girl video.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
show me how girls run. And it was amazing to me that the difference between what the kids would do, like what girls would do, versus like people our age would do, just like the I don't know if stereotypical is the right word, but just like the very biased way that boys and girls would portray like what Like a Girl meant to them.
Mm-hmm.
It just made me wonder like at what age do we think that Like a Girl is an insult? But I think that would be a really good introduction and like a good way to gauge students like interest at first and then start a discussion afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like at what point does that mindset come into play for them? Like how does it develop slowly over time, or is it like all of a sudden you get to fourth, fifth, sixth grade, middle school, and you think that doing something like a girl is a negative phrase?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely like a socially constructed thing. It's not something that like you just learn naturally. Like it's
Yeah.
something that like you've been told that. So like, oh, and it's told you in like a negative context and like you're like, oh, well then that's a bad thing. Like being like a girl is a bad thing. Like it's wimpy, it's whatever, you know.
Mhm.
So I wonder if it's like I mean, it's obviously experience wise, but like I guess going along with your question, like when do those experiences start happening? And it has to like I guess it comes from like parents obviously because like kids don't necessarily come into it, you know, just saying that from nowhere. Like they get it from somewhere too. Like I don't know.
Mhm.
It almost makes me think that it starts as young as, as soon as they can walk. Like when you think about the Josie Romero story, like in the interviewer asked her like at what age did you know that, you identified as a girl? And Josie said always, like, and if she can identify that she wanted to be like a girl at such a young age, I feel like then other kids at that similar age has the ability to recognize that like girls like pink, boys like blue, and just like it's always that binary. And I think this week's like content really made me question like what our definition of gender is and like how broad it can be for other people and how different it could be depending on the person. But it's definitely some really interesting, and I feel like it does really have a huge effect on our kids, like our students, our future students.
I mean,
Interesting.
and it begins like when the mother finds out like what gender they have. Like it's I don't remember like what I read or it was a study or something that like women, you know, treat their bellies differently too for like when they find out the gender or like, you know, they pick a color for the room of the baby, you know, like so it does start like even like before they're born, like
Hmm. Like gender reveals, like
interesting.
when I cut into this cake, is it going to be pink or blue? Like
Yeah.
that may not be the child learning it at that point, but that's just perpetuating that pink is for girls, blue is for boys, and I don't know. I just don't.
Well, and that's how like it like you're gonna treat your baby differently. Like not meaning to, but you're just going to, like
Mhm.
based on those expectations, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like I think I saw like a video and I took like a psychology class like a couple years ago and it was like it showed after like the parents had learned or like I think it was like right after the baby was born or whatever and they like didn't find out until after they if it was like a boy they would call it like oh you're such a strong boy blah 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 but if it was a girl they would call her beautiful or pretty and so just even that was so frustrating to me that they would only be calling their boy strong and like they just kind of associate weakness with the girl and that the only compliment that they can come up with is calling her pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that we associate adjectives with genders
Right.
like that. That shouldn't be something that we do, yet it happens all the time and unconsciously. Like we
Hmm.
we say it without thinking about it.
Hmm.
And that kind of goes back to that video that we were talking about earlier about like calling someone bossy. Like, so when a man gets up there, they're like a strong leader and they're a powerful person. But if a woman gets up there, she's bossy. Or like the host of the show was like saying like, you know, a male host of a show can get like angry and start cursing about whatever they're talking about, but they're just like um oh gosh, what's the word? They just like are, oh, I lost the word. But they get like they get into it and they know like what they're doing, but like a woman is called emotional if they start doing that.
Hmm.
What is the word I'm looking for? I don't know. But I just think that's interesting.
Hmm. Should we talk about like the kids books from this week?
Yeah. I kind of had a different view on the in Our Mother's House. I liked it and I could relate to it, the not the having two moms portion, but just like the family dynamic of so much love and so much support and everyone always coming together and everything being great. But then again, I didn't really appreciate the book because it like presented that type of situation in that way, and I really didn't like how when presented with like the neighbors' disagreement with their lifestyle, that the moms just kind of shrugged it off and didn't say anything until the very end. And then at the very end, they said, like, she doesn't know how to love, or there seems to be no love in her heart either. And we have to realize that saying those, like reading that aloud to our students, we could have students in our class that are thinking the same way as the neighbor, and telling them that this neighbor has no love is like telling our kids that they have no love in their heart. So it could be degrading to students. But that was just, like, I feel like the overall message of the book was good, but there was a few tweaks that I think could have been adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked that it was like in the perspective of what the kids like, but it like made me wonder too, like what the author, like what's her story and if she had any part of it. And there's like a little flap on the back cover that it said like this is based on like real life, but it didn't really say that like this isn't really her story. Like, is she telling it of someone else? Like, I don't know. It just made me wonder.
Yeah. I feel like after reading it and like also reading that little portion about the author, it kind of made me think that this book was like written more from like an outsider point of view. Like I feel like this book would be completely different if it was written by like a gay parent
Yeah.
rather than someone who's like looking from the outside at this is how I think their life is and what they experience.
Yeah.
I think that's too, like,
I also thought, go ahead.
You can go, Alexis. No, you can go.
I also thought that like the images were kind of like stereotypical, like of the lesbian couple, like just the way they were like dressed and like the really short haircuts and just kind of like I feel like that's pretty stereotypical of like a lesbian couple, and I didn't really appreciate that. But go ahead.
I forgot my train of thought, but it's okay. It wasn't that important.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. But one thing, I almost felt like this book was trying almost too hard to make it seem like there was a mom and there was a dad situation, but they also switched roles, so they almost made it try and seem too perfect, like, of a family.
Yeah.
But I guess because it's being told from the child's point of view, that is how she saw her family. And she saw it as normal and perfect and loving, which it clearly is. But books should also take into account that this is not the typical, like, family structure all the time.
Yeah.
So do you guys think that like this book is like authentic enough and like so much that you would like want to use it in your classroom as an example, or do you think it's more of a non-example?
I think for a younger age it would be an example, but I think older students would really be able to pick it apart, just like we kind of were able to.
I feel like by picking it apart, I'm at the library. I feel like by picking it apart too, though, they could learn equally as much. So I don't know. I just feel like with how little resources there are available of families with like gay parents, I don't know. And because this is like the first one that I've ever read, I'm hesitant to say like yes because it's my first experience with them. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you could like use it in a good way, whether it's because you could like lead a discussion in one way versus another, especially with like younger students versus older students. Like you could be more critical with the discussion if you're working with older students, and if whereas with like younger students, you're just kind of like introducing them to like that kind of book with like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We are at 30 minutes, and we need one more muddy question. I talked about, so for D, I had to like look up a website and like on what basis did I want to, like evaluate it and like see if it's a valid source. And so the one that I found was called, it was like for Advocates for Youth, like .org, and it was like a list of all of these resources that were available for like the LGBTQI community, and I thought it was a good one. But again, like I have no experience with, like I don't know much about the LGBTQI like community, so I don't want to like rush into saying like yes, this is a good website. But for me, like they had lists for alliances, resources for gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and youth adult partnerships. But I think the most important part was that they had a hotline for like people who may be like seeking help and can't find it like around their lives. So in that, I was like impressed by the website, but I think they could have involved more for parents as well, who has, a kid who's a part of the LGBTQI community. But yeah, it was a pretty good site.
There's also there's another site that's specific. I took the health class last quarter, I believe it was, and one of the things, like the final projects, was you have to look up a resource that minority students could use, and being the LGBTQ, that is a minority in our classrooms, and one of the website was called the Rainbow Center, and that was I just remember it being a really good resource for students to use. Like there's events that you can volunteer for, there's advocacy for victims of crimes, and about just all about the resource center, and it gives them ways to reach out to people if they're struggling. So I liked that resource when we had to go in and look at that. And it's one that's specific to Washington.
Yeah, I remember that one too.
Yeah.
Because I think I was in the quarter before you for health, but I think someone else might have talked about that one as well. And then I can't remember the name of the other one. I'm trying to find it right now. But there was this one other one that someone presented in my health class that was it was almost like a Q&A, but you could also like actually talk to people online and ask questions. So it wasn't, I don't remember if it was completely anonymous or if it was just, like you can talk to someone from one of these support groups, or, you could just like check out their website and look at their Q&As really quick, or like their frequently asked questions. But it was kind of cool because there was actually like resources, ways to just kind of get some information if you didn't want to talk to anybody, and then actually like talking to a real life person, even if it is just like over chat or something. So it was just, I liked that one because you could actually like speak to someone even if it was just for a couple minutes to just get a little bit of comfort. So.
Yeah. Well, and was that chat just like a instant messenger thing, like no video face call?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that provides a better outlet for them if they don't feel comfortable, like if they're not out and they don't want anyone to know, like that's a very safe way for them to get help and to talk about what they're struggling with.
Yeah.
So how do you provide these resources like to your students, like if they aren't comfortable enough to even like come to you, like I guess you don't really know. But
Well,
I feel like what you kind of have to do is not present it to specific students, or even to, like, say you're a middle school teacher and you have 4 classes that rotate throughout the day. You can't present it to just one class. It has to be, like one of the articles says, it has to be a school-wide, embedded in the curriculum, and a school-wide effort to make this known that there are resources out there for students. I've never seen it in elementary school, though. Like, it would be super interesting to see that, because as we saw with Jazz and with Josie, like, they're wanting to transition and they're making these big life decisions at such a young age, yet we didn't see the aspect of the school. Like, what were their teachers saying? What were their peers at school saying about it? How was it being dealt with and recognized and appreciated at the school level? I feel like a lot of videos that talk about transgender youth or gay youth or anything, they specifically target the home life and what they're dealing with their parents, instead of what they're dealing with, how their school is addressing it, and how their school is helping them. And I think that's something that needs to be focused on more in those types of videos and articles.
Yeah.
I feel like
definitely, because the school is a lot more their life.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like throughout, like, all the content that we read this week, I was just gonna say that not a lot of them, except for maybe, like, Jazz's video addressed, like, trans issues. And I was just thinking, because I watch that show every week, and I think I remember her saying that she wrote a book, like, all about it, and it was, I haven't looked into it. I would really like to read it, but I feel like that would be a really good resource to bring into the classroom, so, like, students better understand what it means to be a trans person.
Mm-hmm.
And that would obviously be authentic because Jazz wrote the book. It's coming from, like, an authentic place.
Yeah. And I thought the video about Josie was interesting, because you don't see a lot of videos where students are questioning their choice to transition, and the video even talked about that. Like, a lot of the statistics that are gathered are only gathered from the perspective of, like, one side. They don't show both sides. And I think it's important to show that, like, yes, these kids are going through this and they're thinking about these big life changes, and they think that they want to do it so badly, but we also need to showcase their questions that they're having about it, because their questions that they're having are likely what others are having.
Do we have our 3 money questions?
Yeah,
We do. Okay.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and really quick, guys, oh, crap. That was not what I meant to do. I just found that there's a children's book that's based off Jazz Jennings, and then she has her own book that she wrote herself. There's, like, a kid's version and then a teen's version.
Cool.
So it could be multifaceted.
Yeah.
For different age groups, I guess.
Good resources that we could use, but we definitely need to look into the story that it's portraying. Cool. I liked this week.
Yeah.
Same. Okay.